The night Jeremy Cole drove into Black Hollow, the clouds were low and heavy, their underbellies glowing softly from the distant moonlight. The two-lane road was barely visible past the dim reach of his headlights, swallowed by dense forest on both sides. He was just supposed to pass through, a scenic shortcut on his road trip to the coast, but a wrong turn and a failing GPS had funneled him down this forgotten stretch of highway. Something about the place made him slow down. Maybe it was the eerie calm, maybe it was the sign he'd passed 2 miles back that read, "Welcome to Black Hollow, population," or maybe it was the sudden, inexplicable urge he felt to stop. At precisely 11:57 p.m., Jeremy's dashboard flickered. His radio cut to static. The engine coughed, then steadied again. He leaned forward, blinking hard. That's when he saw it. To his left, just beyond the trees, stood a house. 2 stories, old Victorian style, with a turret and gables that curled like the edges of old paper. The porch light was on, glowing faint yellow, casting long shadows through the pines. There was no driveway, no mailbox, and no sign it had ever been there before. He pulled over instinctively. Part of him knew better. This wasn't normal. But another part, the stronger part, felt like he'd been here before. Like the house was waiting for him. He stepped out of the car and onto the pine needle-covered ground. The air was cooler than expected, crisp and slightly metallic. With every step toward the house, his senses sharpened. He could hear the wind rustling dry leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and his own heartbeat thudding louder with each footfall. When he reached the porch, the floorboards creaked but held steady. The front door was ajar, not enough to invite, but just enough to tempt. Jeremy pushed it open. Inside, the house was dimly lit by oil lamps mounted on the walls. There was no electricity, yet everything looked clean, pristine even. The wallpaper was floral, faded but intact. A grandfather clock ticked softly in the hall. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something older, like books left unopened for decades. "Hello," Jeremy called out. His voice echoed strangely, as if the house were larger on the inside. No reply. Just the creak of the floor under his boots. He wandered deeper. The living room had velvet chairs, a stone fireplace with fresh ashes, and a painting above the mantel. It was of a woman, young, perhaps in her 20s, with dark hair pulled into a bun. Her eyes, painted in haunting detail, seemed to follow him. Jeremy checked his phone. 12:01 a.m. No service. The screen glitched once, then froze entirely. He shoved it back in his pocket and moved on. The kitchen was spotless. Copper pots hung above a stove that looked like it belonged in the early 1900s. The fridge was ancient, more of an icebox, but inside it was empty and dry. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone restored this house. Maybe it was a hidden Airbnb. Maybe he'd find a rational explanation upstairs. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning under his weight. The second-floor hallway was lined with doors, 4 in total. He tried the first. A bedroom, untouched, with lace curtains swaying gently as if moved by breath instead of wind. The second door revealed a study. Books lined the shelves, titles he didn't recognize. Some in Latin, some in French. A journal lay open on the desk. He leaned over to read it, but the handwriting twisted and turned the longer he looked, almost as if it resisted being read. He blinked and stepped back. Third door locked. Fourth door creaked open to reveal a nursery. Old toys. A wooden crib. Music box on a dresser. He turned the knob, it played by itself. A soft lullaby, slow and warped. Jeremy felt cold suddenly, his skin prickling. He backed out and shut the door. When he turned back to the hallway, the lights flickered. The oil lamps sputtered, and for a moment, he thought he saw a figure at the end of the hall. A woman in old clothing. Just standing. He didn't speak. He just blinked, and she was gone. Jeremy stumbled down the stairs, heart pounding. He reached the front door, pulled it open, and stepped outside. The wind was stronger now. Pine trees swayed violently. He turned to look back at the house. It was gone. Nothing but forest. No porch, no doorway, no windows. Just an empty patch of earth where the house had been. Jeremy looked around in disbelief. He was still on the same road. His car sat idling nearby. Everything was exactly as it had been, except the house no longer existed. He climbed back into his car, shaking. His phone rebooted itself and displayed the time, 12:17 a.m. He drove on in silence, unsure if what he saw had been real. But when he stopped at a gas station 20 miles later, he saw a flyer pinned to the bulletin board outside. It was old, yellowed, and curling at the edges. It showed a picture of the very house he'd just seen. The headline read, "Help us find our daughter, missing since 1932. And below it, in faded ink, was the name, Margaret Ellison. Last seen entering the house on Hollow Road. A house that no longer exists." Jeremy stood frozen, the night wind tugging at the corner of the flyer. He was going back. The air around the house crackled with tension as Ethan stepped forward. He felt like he was walking into a dream stitched together from shadows and memory. The house had reappeared at midnight exactly as it always did, but tonight it looked slightly different, less spectral and more grounded in reality. The moonlight hit the siding in a way that made it shimmer faintly, like it was caught between two worlds. He reached out and touched the door. It was solid, warm even, and it swung open on its own with a long, aching creak. Inside, the house was alive. Not in the haunted sense, but in a deeper, stranger way. The wallpaper pulsed faintly like it was breathing. The chandeliers flickered with candles that hadn't been lit in decades. The house seemed to acknowledge Ethan, to welcome him in a way he couldn't quite explain. As he stepped inside, the door shut behind him with a finality that suggested there was no turning back. He moved cautiously through the rooms, which seemed to shift slightly when he wasn't looking. Pictures on the walls depicted scenes from his life. His childhood birthday parties, his graduation, even that moment on the pier with Rachel. Some of the photos weren't memories he recognized. They looked like versions of events that never actually happened. One showed his mother alive and smiling at his wedding, something that had never taken place. Another showed a young boy in his arms, eyes identical to Ethan's. He paused, heart thudding. Was this a glimpse of what could have been? Or what might still be? In the center of the house stood a large spiral staircase. It hadn't been there before, and instinctively, he knew he had to ascend it. As he climbed, he could feel the weight of the house shifting, pulling him upward. Each step echoed with whispers and voices he couldn't quite place, until one rang out clearly. "You've almost remembered, Ethan. Just a little further." At the top was a room bathed in silver light. The walls were lined with mirrors, but none of them reflected his current self. Each mirror showed him at different ages in different choices, some triumphant, some broken. In one mirror, he saw himself growing old with Rachel. In another, he saw her leaving as he stood silent and stubborn. In another, he never returned to the town at all. A voice called from behind him. He turned. It was Rachel. Not the Rachel from his memory or dreams, but very much alive and real, standing in the room like she had always belonged there. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her smile was genuine. "I remembered too," she said. "Everything. The house, what it really is." Ethan stepped toward her. "What is this place? Why do we keep coming back?" She looked around slowly. "It's not just a house. It's the place we locked away the truth. A piece of our shared past, so painful we chose to forget it. We created it, Ethan. Together. When we couldn't handle what happened." He struggled to understand. "What did we forget?" She led him to the center of the room, where a small box sat on a pedestal. As they opened it, images flooded his mind. Had been 10 years ago. Rainy night. Crash. Rachel had been driving. They had been arguing. The house had once been theirs. A fixer-upper they bought with hopes of starting a family. That night in the rain, the car had skidded and they had lost the baby. Rachel had blamed herself. Ethan had shut down completely. They couldn't cope, so they buried it all. mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. The house had become a symbol of that trauma, banished from their conscious minds. And yet, it remained, returning every midnight as their grief tried to surface. "We weren't ready to remember before," Rachel said softly. "But now we are." The room began to glow warmer, the spectral chill fading. Mirrors began to show only their reflections, together, whole, older but standing strong. The air filled with the scent of wood and lavender, like it once had when they painted the nursery together. Ethan reached out and took her hand. "Can we move forward now?" She nodded. "Yes, but only if we leave the door open. No more hiding." They descended the stairs together. The house didn't fight them this time. It exhaled a long, peaceful sigh, the walls settling, the memories no longer aching but present, acknowledged. At the front door, Ethan paused and looked back. The house looked beautiful now, not haunted but healing. As they stepped out into the crisp night air, the sky began to turn a soft lavender gray. Dawn was coming. The house didn't vanish this time. It remained quiet and still, as if it had finally found peace too. Ethan and Rachel walked away hand in hand, hearts lighter than they had felt in years. Because some houses don't just disappear at midnight. Some are finally remembered.